let's make an LEC tier list. Let's start at the bottom. XL. I think that XL, they are doomed. Like, they are so doomed. They dropped games against... Like, that game against Fnatic was a disaster, dude. It was a complete disaster. And it is looking very tough. I think we salute XL, you know. I think that what the individuals must be going through right now must be very rough. I think that this is not working, you know? People are calling this a super team, but I never thought it was a super team. It's like, I rated them like mid. I didn't think that this roster was that strong on paper, but I didn't think it was this bad. I would be very surprised if XL stays the same. Some scars and wounds are a little bit too deep. And I hope that at least this weekend they can find some kind of redemption, because odds are that this last weekend will just be additional salt in the wounds. Main reasons why XL are doing this bad: I think they have no clue how to draft. I think they have no clue how to play, and individually they are looking really bad. It's very hard to pinpoint anything in particular. I think to blame one person is really... Like, it's insane. Stop trying to find like one person to blame here. They are just quite terrible, and that's it. I think they are by far the weakest, and there is not much more to add. It's like, if you want my advice on what they need to do, like, they need to make, they need to draft scaling and make their compositions as cookie cutter as possible. Like, patent the bot, make bot base, patent the bot again, make bot base, and just try to play in a way where you're just 5 people on the screen and hope that you can prey on the mistakes of others. The tricky thing when you're in these positions is that it's like, when everything's going down the drain, it's like often players, they're going to look within for a solution, and that makes the team scatter even further. Ideally, what you want to do in situations like this is to rally behind the same idea. For example, last year when we were really having a hard time in Fnatic, you know, and we were moving into a situation that we might not make playoffs, what did we do for the rest of the season? We drafted Lucian Nami, and we made sure we counterpicked Yuumi, and we made the meta about that, so the game would look exactly the same between all of the matches. You know, we made sure that Lucian, Nami, Yuumi were a part of the game, so the game would look exactly the same. And the champions that we wanted to pick would have the same amount of relevancy. So we would draft in a very similar fashion, and our edge came through the idea of us willing to play Lucian Nami, willing to play into Lucian Nami, and then also willing to play into Yuumi. So we could make sure that each game looked very similar to the previous one, up until the point where we faced Rogue and they kind of figured us out. It makes you very one-dimensional, but in the short term, it is a way of picking up wins. I think that Kobe and Yonghoon still really good. I think Kobe's insane, by the way. I think Kobe deserves a different team, by the way. I think Kobe deserves a different team. It's dank as shit. Finn was a huge upgrade for Astralis, in my opinion. I think that he had some rough games this split. Like, he played well up until the point where he really threw situations. I think that if you think of how they made an upgrade, Vichichachi had some bangers, by the way. Vichichachi has some bangers, right? And he was very willing to play for his team. That's what Vichichachi did. And it gave them depth, and it gave them dimension. It's like Astralis were competing for playoffs last year, and they won a couple of games, like a bunch of games, honestly, on like Wukong, on Xerxes. I think Yonghoon, Kobe, really strong players. I wouldn't be surprised if they get picked up from Astralis. And then Astralis, I hope they sell their spot. That's the harsh truth. But I have to say, I think a 1-1-3, Trundle, brilliant pick. Really good game here from Finn. I think he solo killed. He never had a moment where he lost his mind. I think this was a very consistent game. I think was a good performance from Finn. But then again, keep in mind it was against XL, so we take it with a grain of salt. Another thing, right? It's like Dior still hasn't shown much to convince me that he belongs in the LEC. So I hope that you know, I hope that he shows something very extra here. And it's crazy how things can change in a week, because my opinion of Certus, my opinion of Nuke, They went up super much over the last weekend. Keep in mind, coming into this weekend, BDS and SK, they were 1 and 2, right? And I didn't rate them that high. 1 week, 3-0, good shit, man. The team that I'm going to put next to Astralis will be Fnatic. Fnatic is experiencing quite the downward spiral. You know, a part of me was hopeful because the first week they won 1 and 2, but the game against Vitality, you know, they showed off some skill. The game against G2 was hard to judge off of, and it seemed like Fnatic still had some sense of identity. But now it's hard for me to put them much higher than here. But I might change it depending on how the rest of it's going to look like, because I don't know how it's going to look like, if it's going to make sense at the end. Maybe I have to add another tier or something. But all in all, Fnatic, very one-dimensional. I think it's looking very rough. I think they're having a super hard time. And the team that I would put next to them is KOI. Like, in my mind here, I think even though there's a world, right? Like, in terms of odds, I think KOI Fnatic making it out over Astralis is definitely, you know, in terms of odds, I think KOI and Fnatic are going to make it out, because that 1 win extra that both of these teams have is really huge. But I think the difference between these teams is rough. I feel like the main difference is that I feel like Astralis are doing better, right? And they're figuring out some things about themselves, while I feel like Fnatic and KOI are somehow getting worse in terms of how they want to draft, in terms of identity. So in terms of that momentum, I think Astralis is looking better, right? In terms of that momentum. So we shall see. We continue. This is where it gets interesting. I would say Team Heretics right here. I think, you know, Team Heretics had competitive games against the teams below them. Very close games that could have ended either way. But at least they are self-aware and they capitalize on the weakness of the teams below them. If that makes sense? Team Heretics, at least it's like, for example, the game against Fnatic. So Fnatic had some good, decent early game, and then it's like they completely lost their mind. It's like the way they fought was poor, the way they played the split push was poor, even was getting caught left and right. It was a very rough showing. But Team Heretics, at least, you know, they went the Braum route, the Azi route, Wukong route, Ebi on Kesante, you know, they kept it very simple. I think that gives Team Heretics an edge. You know, from speaking to Yonkers as well, it's like they seem to be aware of themselves and they seem to be united in their issues. And I think that puts Team Heretics above the team below them. The next layer, I would say now, is Mad Lions. I would say put Mad Lions in A. I have to see how this plays out. I'll put them in A here because I do believe Mad Lions is better than all of the teams below them and also a step above Team Heretics. I think Mad Lions, you know, strong bot lane presence, good 2v2 mid, good principled play. Sometimes I think the main weakness I feel of Mad Lions still is in terms of how Mad play around the side lanes. Their solo lanes getting caught a lot. They're struggling to connect in situations when Mad Lions don't have an easy way of getting mid prio. I think this is where they struggle. But I think that this is something that Mad Lions definitely can improve. And I think that Mad Lions definitely are better than the teams below them. I think that Karzi and Hilly have been performing super good. And I think that they look decent. Right next to Mad Lions, I want to slot in SK. I think SK have shown really strong early games. I think Markoon has been playing so damn good. Really well. I think that Exakick and DOS, in situations where they have the matchups that they're comfortable in, for example, very nice there. They first pick Lucian. Really like the first pick Lucian over Nami when Yuumi is in the picture, because Lucian Yuumi is a combo, by the way. Lucian Yuumi is a combo. They smacked KOI on the forehead. They dominated bot. I think Markoon is playing well. I think Irrelevant is being a silent hero, you know? Irrelevant is not as flashy as Photon and Adam, but playing really well. Really, you know, standing on his own, figuring out a lot of the lane matchups. Really good. I think Certus has had a fantastic weekend, you know. The Kali game was really good. So SK definitely belong here, up in 8 here. Big jump. You know, big jump from the first week. Like the first week, keep in mind, it's like Markoon was ulting in on cooldown and running it down. And we definitely had like some insanely big disasters. And SK won one game, and that was off of the back team Heretics kind of portaling into them. You guys remember, but they figured it out. There is something to be said about the teams that have a lot less pressure on them and are aligned, and they are focusing actually on gameplay rather than the bullshit politics of being in a team. That is the beauty of a team like SK, BDS. They're just focusing on playing the game better as a group. That's at least my impression. I think SK had some beautiful drafts, beautiful gameplay, you know? Like the Elise, like they were fortunate. They were fortunate in a way, right? They played against the Vitality and they played against a G2 that drafted quite poorly, but SK capitalized on that. In the game against G2, they recognized that this is going to be a front-to-back game. Varus Lulu got locked in. They slammed Azir and Sion, and they knew this game is going to be front-to-back. As long as we win the front-to-back, there's nothing to be done. And then they Elise dove bot, and G2 were patting towards the wrong lane. And then boom, slam, they won a game. And what a confidence boost that was. Then you move into the game against Vitality. You had, of course, Markoon just eating Bo's face off in the jungle. And this was another one of those cases where you could argue, you know, that SK recognizing the value of Elise is a really big deal. Because I think Elise is really, really strong. There's two ways of playing the meta right now, right? Either you go super, super hard in the early game, or you pick a composition that is going to scale super, super well, right? That's two approaches to the meta right now. Either you pick hard scaling, or you pretty much set yourself up to like turbo smurf in the early game. The beautiful thing about Elise is that she's either going to help you transition, right? If you have a composition that is scaling super well, and that is what your composition is built around, Elise can secure your early game and set you up for success. And she can make lanes that don't have the power to dive, to actually dive. And that is such a big deal, because so often when you're cross-mapping, let's say Sivir Yumi together with some champions are not going to be able to dive unless they have Elise on their side. And Elise as well, in those compositions that are very early game heavy, she can find herself in situations where she fights level 3, and I think this is something that SK did super, super well. Yeah, Markoon was always strong in the early game. In the previous alteration of XL, like this is where they looked the most dangerous, right? When they were diving bot, when they were diving mid together with Nuktak, Volibear, and Lissandra. That was something that was super, super good. Speaking of champions that are slept on, I think Trundle is another champion that is slept on. And I find it crazy. I find it crazy that it's getting buffed, because I think Trundle is low-key OP. Udyr is another one. I think Udyr is a fantastically broken champion. Not in the spot that G2 picked it. Like this was some anti-Udyr propaganda. But picking Udyr into Cassiopeia, Varus, Ashe, honestly, Udyr is like fine against Varus, right? Perfectly fine. But there are so many slows in that game. It's like you are having a hard time. Nevertheless, Udyr was picked into Cassio, and then you picked K'Sante. You basically picked two big potatoes, right? K'Sante and Udyr are practically the same champ, right? They're two juggernauts. If they touch you, you are really regretting the fact that you are close to them, right? So they have the same weaknesses. Cassio and Gwen are so good into that. So good into that. We follow this up with BDS. Here is BDS. I think BDS, right? The reason I think that BDS is slightly better than these two is because so far, I've seen more that makes them more complete. And that is just the circumstance of the games that SK and BDS found themselves in. Okay? So I think Adam is in conversation. So like, if I think of the three best performing top laners right now in the league, I think you have Adam, Photon, Irrelevant. So basically, I wouldn't put BB in the top 3 because all of the games that G2 have won had nothing to do with BB. And once again, that can be tied to circumstance. BDS, I think that they are the most complete because I think I've seen the most sides to their bot lane. I've seen the most sides to their top lane. And we've seen, in terms of jungle, I think jungle, Shio has been doing decent. We saw the Maokai, we saw the Wukong, we saw the Sejuani. You know, Crowny and Labrov are popping off. The main thing is, in a situation where SK got opportunities to show more, maybe I would put SK higher. With what I've seen so far, SK just needs to have more opportunities to show more. Because I think that the Elise was a really, really big pick for them in 2 of the games. And I imagine that some of the other teams are going to pick up Elise coming into this weekend. I think Elise is super, super strong. So once again, I reserve the right to say that I think that SK could be better than both of these teams, right? But I think that the first game against G2 completely outdrafted, beautiful dive on bottom side, right? And then they just coasted and they won the game. And then, of course, against Vitality, it's like Photon was playing Ornn, you had Bo on Maokai, and then you had like the Tristana angle, right? I don't think that's that great. And I don't want to be that draft Andy, right? But these 2 games was also the worst performances we saw from Vitality and also G2. And that is not removing props from SK. I think that their bot lane has played fucking good. Markoon has played fucking good. And there's a chance, you know, there's a chance that they can be elevated to S2. But I just need to see more, right? I'm just judging based on what I've seen so far. And it might be unfair to SK because they haven't gotten that opportunity to show more. This to me, right? I'm making this tier list off of the games, right? Not based on what I think the teams are going to be ending in the standings. That's something we're going to talk about later. After, I'm going to put G2 and S. People are going to be crazy. Oh, they're 4-2, blah, blah, blah. I think that both games that G2 lost, they got completely outdrafted. And that can be a concern in itself, right? It can definitely be a concern in itself because they seem to be really, really hinging on this idea of having a stronger bot lane and diving that and picking the strongest jungler in the game and just hard pressuring that. And when they are not allowed to do so, they kind of are ending up in shit drafts. Oh, holy moly, Janusz. Janusz 1, thank you very much for the 10 gifted subs. That is amazing. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That is the greatest thing anyone has ever done to me. Thank you. Appreciate it. So I believe G2 is S because still they've shown the highest level in the early game. G2, I think, deadliest early game by far. When they're in a situation where their lanes aren't as strong, they don't really consolidate their draft by thinking about the later stages of the game. And I think this is something that G2 can figure out. They have the player to do so. And in their game against SK, they made a wrong judgment in terms of how they should path. They got Dove, and then later the draft was just unplayable. Like picking Akali on 4 into Maokai, Lulu, Sivir. Yumi, Sivir, Maokai. So this was G2 in their first loss against SK. So the enemy first pick Elise and then Varus and Graves. And this kind of shows to me, right, that they are not really interested in playing Yumi themselves. And then Yumi Sivir was picked because the main issue here, right, what G2 recognized coming into the next game is that they have to red side ban Yumi. If they red side ban Yumi, they can create a situation where either they get the strongest bot 1-2 or they counter the first pick bot. Okay? Which is a very big deal. Okay? This is what they recognized. Here, the issue with G2's draft is that they don't want to 1-2 Yumi, and they can't counter Yumi on 3 by picking, let's say, let's say they pick Azir Graves, and then enemy goes Yumi Sivir. And then here you have to choose, are we picking Nautilus or are we picking Draven? So this is not something that they want to do. So they went Varus. Heimerdinger was out, and Ashe was out, and this was just a brilliancy. And the main thing from SK here is that this was the moment they recognized, oh, there's going to be complete front to back. Just slam a tank top that's going to have buttons, and we don't care if we're going to lose lane, we're going to play into bottom side anyway, and then we have Azir. Right? Here, in all honesty, right, in most cases, you pick the Yumi lane, right? You pick the Yumi, and then you pick whatever AD, you either pick AD together, or you pick AD on 3. That's what most teams would do here, right? And now they went Varus, Lulu, Graves. And then you pick Akali on 4. And in my mind already, you can see in the draft the direction it's been going in is that it is going to be a front-to-back game. Imagine here if G2 are the ones to pick Azir on 4, and then they pick, let's say, a counter pick tank on 5. Then it's going to be a little bit more of a cohesive composition. But I think this Akali pick here, even though in isolation against Azir is something that we see often, this is just a composition that is not going to win in a front-to-back situation. And I think here SK did a really good job of recognizing that, and then also, of course, just straight up diving bot and winning the game on the spot. Really good. G2 made the adjustment of banning Yuumi, and then enemy team had to choose. Are we picking Lucian? Are we picking Lucian, or are we giving the enemy Lucian Nami? Because we are not willing to play the Draven, right? This is a good game, right? And then finally, in G2's game against Vitality, here Draven, Kalista, Elise was banned. And then here in most cases, I think Riot's first pick is kind of overblown in terms of value. And the Ashe Varus rotation was brilliant. Really good. Ashe is going to, of course, deny most of the things that jungle wants to accomplish. And Varus Ashe is just a very strong lane. They can push early, and that already, in essence, denies a lot of the things that G2 has done so far, right? To gain monster leads. Because their games always start level 1, and then they dive you level 3, and then they push out the jungler, and then so forth, right? They get the vibe because it's good into Lucian Nami. And it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter that Udyr is stronger than Vi, right? If Udyr and Vi, like Vi is never going to fight Udyr. It's not necessary. She just needs to cover lanes and needs to play where she has push, and then it's okay, right? Sure, in some cases Udyr being stronger than Vi is going to matter in 2v2s, 3v3s, but when you have Ashe E, it becomes very easy to play a controlled game, and you can always choose your fights, right? And that's super important. So like Udyr in isolation against Vi, I think is super good. And I wish we saw more Udyr against Vi, right? I wish we did. But this is a terrible game for Udyr. Because the K'Sante invites the Gwen on 5, and there's already a Cassiopeia showing. And this is a composition where Udyr is going to really have some pain. Because keep in mind, Udyr wants to buy Demonic Embrace, and then he wants to go for Radiant Virtue. So the item, like, by the time he finishes his third item, which is rare on jungle, you are just in shambles. And this is once again the issue of blue side. Because if you look here at 4-5, into what the enemy has picked, it's very hard to like find champions that are going to solve this, right? Blind picking is awkward. It's like, what do? Do you just like the best thing that you can hope for? Like maybe you pick Wukong, right? You pick Wukong, and then you just fucking blind pick Ornn. Like, let's say you do that. That could be a way. You just blind pick Ornn, you take it up the bum, and you just go Wukong and Ornn. That could be a way. As an example. Maybe. But then it's like, oh, Gwen is 50 CS ahead of Ornn. What do you do in this game? Could happen, right? And then it's also rough. The here is like, Wukong looks decent to me. Is Viego just bad? No, Viego is like an early game jungler, and Viego got banned because they just target the Ike, right? But here you just need kind of tools to push yourself forward and to play forward. But nevertheless, right? Vitality, once again, even though I think G2 got outdrafted into these two games, I think both Vitality and SK played super well in the early game. Like, you're very short range. It's like Hans Sama tried so fucking hard to carry this game, but there's so much shit thrown at him. So much garbage that is going to be thrown at his forehead, right? Ashe arrows, Violets, Varus, Cassio. They can throw all of their tools on Lucian. It's like Lucian needs to 1v9, and it becomes too hard when the enemy has so many tools. But once again, I want to highlight, even though I'm talking about G2, Vitality, really good draft structure. Varus and Ashe removing Draven Kalista to just guarantee that there's not going to be any crazy shenanigans. They are guaranteeing, yo, we don't want to get dove, we don't want to get level 1 invaded, we want to make the game as stable as possible. And also here I have to say, you know, Bo, brilliant ganking, very good patterns. He really, like, he found a kill on Nami early, after they tried to bounce the wave. Vi secured the bot side crab and Udyr ended up on the wrong side, right? I see Varus Ashe, I play Nautilus. Yeah, could be. Yeah, could be. You know? But what AD do you play Nautilus here with? Could be that you just play Nautilus. You just eat shit until you can Q in and kill. Yeah, just go Nautilus Samira. That could be crazy. Yeah, that could be something. That could be something, yeah. But nevertheless, I think that G2's ability to be very strong in the early game is a big strength, and I think is going to be super relevant as everything continues. I think that G2 just need to recognize in draft when they find those balances. And I think that the Ryze first pick is something that teams are going to have to like maybe reconsider, because the Ryze first pick hasn't looked so good so far in Europe at least. Okay, in my mind, I think there's ways for 5 to just pick for composition, you know? The issue with Blitzcrank is that he has too small of a mana pool, and if you get pushed in, like you just struggle. You're gonna get pushed in, harassed, you know, and you just need more tools. I feel to play this game. The only way I saw G2 win this is because they just need to snowball the shit out of the game, but it's so hard. How do you create volatility in the game with the enemy bot lane as Ashe Varus? It's very difficult. And then on top of that, Photon was out laning top. He burned Flash 1v1 against BB, and Cassio was just farming away. The thing is, people are saying that Blitzcrank is coin flip, but it's like a weighted coin. It's like legit like 15, 20 to 80. It's like sometimes Blitzcrank works if you have very strong AD and you have the space to like flash on enemy to E and then to Q. That works. Yeah, that definitely works. Make some noise. There we have Ender in the chat. Hello, Ender. And then finally for me, Vitality is first. The Vitality have really figured out the meta, I feel. I think that they've figured out the meta and their learning curve has been gorgeous. And keep in mind, you know, there could be a world where they are 4-2, right? So like, don't focus on the score too much, right? Don't focus on the score too much. I think G2 and Vitality are going to lock in top 2. Don't get baited too much by the score. Because it's like, would you rate Vitality differently if they lost the game against Fnatic? Because that was a game for them to lose, right? Would we have rated them differently? No, we wouldn't. So let's keep things realistic. Why is Vitality the strongest? I think that the draft they showed against G2 was gorgeous. I think the play that Bo is showing is absolutely astonishing. I think it's so nice to see. I think that he finds good gank angles, his pathing, his efficiency is just gorgeous. I think it's really, really insane. Like, I think Vitality is a very complete team. Main concern for me is, right, it's like here, they showed Ashe and Varus and they laned super well. You know, main concern for me with Vitality is still, you know, the Caitlyn and the Luxus. Like, what happens when the meta shifts? Can Vitality consistently figure out what they want to play bot? No, I think that's the main thing that you can pay attention to, and maybe there's an entry there. And this time around, Vitality was on red side against G2, and they drafted super well. You know, in hindsight, right? In hindsight, if you look at the draft of G2, it's like G2 here. Lucian Nami is open. Like, they could have also been the ones to be the Ashe side, right? They could have been the Ashe side, and maybe there was something for them to do, right? But I think Photon is really insane. I think Photon versus Adam is going to be a banger matchup. I'm really excited to see those two play, unless they've played already in week 1 and I just completely forgot about it. Obviously, best of ones, things can change. You know, one weekend, one super week is enough to show us a lot of new information that is going to make us change our opinion of things. I want to remind everyone that after week 1, BDS and SK were 1 and 2, and they looked horrible. They looked really horrible. SK won a game where Team Heretics threw, but Exakick was looking really strong. BDS won a game against an SK that didn't know how the fuck to play the game. And then they went into week 2 and they both 3-0'd and looked really, really insane.